Okay, well, thank you very much. This is a rare and fine opportunity to present at this this event. I thank Tim Alch and the others who reached out to me. So I was asked to, well, first of all, about me, I'm a professor at Colorado School of Mines in the mining engineering department, as well as metallurgical materials engineering department. I got 42 years in the business, 12 as a professor at Colorado School of Mines. So I was asked to speak about the value, importance, and challenging of funding mining education. And so this presentation rolls from something that I and a former PhD student, Phil Keller, who's noted on the presentation, did some time ago, but it's been modified for this, so I give him credit. And so I anonymously call this, AKA criticality in intellectual capital. So I'll give you a little background. First of all, you know, I do like to read Dilbert, so I'm hoping my presentation is a vision of beauty and persuasion, and it will make engineers and others weep, and profits will rain down from the sky. But maybe, as we'll see in the bemoaning of mineral engineering education, it generally falls on deaf ears, but that's okay. I enjoy it. So table of contents, I'm going to talk about strategic and critical definitions, how the US defines criticality, and this rolls into our intellectual capital needs, and then guidelines for these critical materials lists, host elements. I'll talk a little bit about it, and then we'll get into the underlying needs of people to carry these things out and give you some examples on rare earth elements and cobalt. So, you know, we have strategic or critical materials, minerals, metals, and they're slightly different. Strategic minerals are commodities that are essential to national defense. So we supply during war wholly in part, and we have a history of that in the United States from World War I and World War II. And we currently have a strategic mineral investment in a beryllium mine in Utah, by the U.S. government, but critical tends to be a bit more vague. It depends upon the purpose, and that's something that you would like to have, but you don't necessarily need it for essential defense and things like that. So you see a lot more discussion. You can read this as quick as I can read it to you, but we have a lot of comment now on criticality. And so what defines criticality? Well, one measure is Executive Order 13817 that was put together in December of 2017, and it's a non-fuel mineral, although that's kind of weird, or mineral material, essentially economic and national security of the United States. And the supply chain is vulnerable, and it serves essential function in manufacturing of a product, the absence of which would have significant consequences for our economy or national security. So our government has kind of lumped criticality with strategic there, and you can see these diagrams. You can go find them online, supply risk versus impact of supply reduction, and of course, the ones that wind up here are deemed, depending on who puts them together, the US or the EU or anyone else, and particularly the application, what's important. Department of Defense versus Department of Energy will have different listings. So here, and I apologize for the smallness of this chart, but this is a definition of criticality, and I think they have a HHI, calculation of marking of competitiveness on a scale of 0 to 10,000. So they give indexes to these things, and there's different ways of categorizing them. And of course, we can see top producers, and you see, goodness Lord, a lot of Chinese top suppliers. Okay, we'll talk more about that. And then, of course, another nice one, you could almost put this on your wall and entertain people, but here is the criticality in terms of host elements. And of course, here's the primary things that we mine and treat. And of course, from these come these byproducts, if you will. Nickel's a very good source of things like palladium. Copper has a number of things, rhenium. So the primary production of minerals, metals, and materials results in these smaller, we used to call them minor metals, now critical metals or materials. And so again, what's important, byproduct versus co-product versus primary production. You can see the definitions. And a lot of these metals and materials are byproduct by their very nature. Rare earths comes from mostly Bayan Obo deposit in China, which is a byproduct of iron ore. That changes the economics, which is a little bit beyond the scope here today. And then, of course, primary. If you have something, I deem copper is critical. There's a large amount, or there is a number of developments in copper production as primary. So let's take a look at some of the things you hear and have heard for the last 10 years about rare earth elements, and people have been waving their hands in the air, making investments. And as we sit here today, the US currently has zero refined production of rare earth elements. And you can read the important sources, China. And here's a statistic that's a bit alarming. The US produced 26,000 tons of unrefined basanite, which is a source of rare earths, from the world's best deposit in California, Mountain Pass. And they're all shipped to China. So what's wrong? What's going on? And the same thing comes with cobalt. We've heard a lot about the new energy economy and batteries, and cobalt is a key element that we need in lithium-ion batteries. There is zero refined production in the US, and yet we have some cobalt-bearing deposits, albeit they would have a number of byproducts or be a byproduct. And who controls that? The Chinese. So, and you can hear now in the press, we just had our Department of Energy Critical Materials Institute annual meeting. One of the speakers was from Washington, D.C., and instructed us that as the U.S. moves away from a fossil fuel energy basis to electrical and renewable vehicles and renewable energy, our dependence on minerals and metals increases dramatically. And again, this is from the U.S. Geological Survey, but sorry, it's small, but it gives you an idea. We have a large dependence upon any number of countries for critical materials. You see this big red blob over here, that's China. And so, I just bought a new truck today. It is fossil fueled, but I like the sound of the engine. But, when we eventually move more and more to electric vehicles, you can see from the bottom here, a normal internal combustion uses 23 kilograms of copper. A hybrid vehicle uses 40, plug-in uses 60. And then if we talk about, depending on the size of the battery, a bus can use up to 369 kilograms. That copper has to come from somewhere. So we are becoming more dependent on metals and materials and minerals and less dependent on fossil fuels. So how does intellectual capital roll into this? Well, this is a quote from Plato, and he says, "Necessity, who is the mother of our invention." Indeed, as we increasingly reach a tipping point, or perhaps from my view, we're past it when it comes to intellectual capital, there is I wouldn't say sudden, there is a gradually awakening of the needs in intellectual capital. So going back in time, we had the Bronze Age, and metals were first used in tools and weapons manufacture, and people began the hunt for copper and tin. And of course, this occurred around 4000 BC. And with that, our metallurgical industry coincided with the rise of urbanization. So we had organized operations of mining and smelting, and we had surplus food. So we quit being hunters and gatherers, right? Although we had to go look for new raw materials. And then the Iron Age came upon us. And this was the need for a critical material called iron to make iron and steel. And of course, as this developed, we had first-time humans were to exploit forests, villages were fortified, and came up with alphabetic writing. So now, and we'll talk about this, we're in perhaps a new copper age or these critical materials, and somebody has to supply them, or somebody has to create the end product. So I'm with the Kroll Institute at the Colorado School of Mines. It began in 1974, and it was from an endowment from Dr. William Justin Kroll, and he created two industries from his work. He was a metallurgist. He created zirconium and titanium. And of course, we just saw in the news that our friends in France are extremely mad because the UK and the US are going to supply nuclear submarines to the Australians. They have advantages as opposed to the French diesel ones. Well, we would not have had any nuclear submarines without Kroll's metallurgical activities. And of course, you have to put up, he won the Perkin Award, which is quite illustrious, in 1943. He says, good metallurgists are not born. They're made with the ample money of opportunity, companies which hire them. And since they usually make their mistakes on a grand scale, they are the nightmares of business management, but you gotta have this. But here is an interesting thing. Back in the day, the Kroll Institute used to give a medal for the Kroll medal. And the first recipient is this gentleman. And this is Hyman Rickover. Hyman Rickover was the father of the modern nuclear navy. And this is Department Head Al Schlechten. So, you know, since 1974, we have been doing research and education in extractive metallurgy, and in part help create a couple of industries and part of our modern world. And so now I will give you my opinions. And of course, I'm in part Irish. So this is a quote from W.B. Yeats from the Isle of Innisfree. I will rise and go now, for always night and day I hear the lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadway or on the pavements gray, I hear it in the deep heart's core. So as we've seen, innovation and extractive metallurgy has made significant impacts on humanity. In any number of things, we could go through them. And it created and sustained the Iron and Bronze Age, created new materials like aluminum, titanium, zirconium. It's been used, created for a need other than it actually found in accidentally, you know, there's any number of those. And it was always created by people willing to put perspiration in the effort, overcome failure, accept risky challenge. And of course, not always rewarded by wealth or fame. So with the desire for renewable energy and electric vehicles, I think we're in a new copper age. Yes, there's abundant copper, 21 million tons of copper cathode created every year. Try permitting a new copper mine in the United States. And if all of a sudden we need globally 4 or 5 million more tons of copper, which can be projected, where's it going to come from? Who is going to extract it, separate it, and refine it? So how do we sustain mineral processing extractive metallurgy? Now, like I said, I have in part an Irish background, and my ancestors came from a place called Allihies, which is on the County Cork, Beara Peninsula. And, you know, people have to give back. In my culture, we give back. So I show this because this is a church that if you saw the size of it, little tiny town, Castleton Bear on the coast of the Beara Peninsula, it's huge. And yet it was built in 1907 after mass immigration occurred. So how did that happen? Well, people gave back. They gave back so that future generations could prosper, right? And of course, here's a nice quote from Pablo Picasso: "The meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose is to give it away." So, and of course, little comments. People don't understand what being a professor is, so I get these all the time. Why do you do research? Are you retired? What do you do with your summers off? You know, they don't understand, but that's okay. So here is a picture of William Kroll, and he gave back. He created the Kroll Institute for Extractive Metallurgy through an endowment from his work in zirconium and titanium. And in part, our activities still occur today because of him. And I would just like to give you some thoughts about our society. I'm a member of the Order of the Engineer. You can see my ring. And The Sons of Martha is a poem about that. I used to read it when we had the ceremony at Montana Tech. I'm not about to pontificate religion, but it's a biblical story of Jesus, the home of Martha and Mary. And he was going to the great beyond, so he stopped by to visit. And of course, Mary sat nobly at Jesus' feet while Martha ran around attending to Jesus, and Jesus got mad and said, "Hey, don't worry about the here and now. I'm taking off here." Because of that, Martha and her children were then directed to serve humanity for the eternity, and so that was the beginning of engineering. And in our world, particularly in mineral engineering, it's not appreciated. This is a show which I enjoy, The Big Bang Theory, and you can see the difference between the appreciation of scientists and engineers. Engineering is merely the slow younger brother of physics. But I will read you this poem. The sons of Mary smile and are blessed. Now the angels are on their side, and they know in them is the grace confessed. For them are the mercies multiplied. They sit at the feet, they hear the word. They know how truly the promise runs. They have cast their burden upon the Lord, and the Lord, he lays it on Martha's sons. So we need more of Martha's sons, but they're hard to get. So there's about 13 schools left that teach and do research in mining in the US. About 8 of these do something in mineral processing, and about 6 teach and research in extractive metallurgy. When you go looking for a mineral processing engineer or an extractive metallurgical engineer, nobody has a degree in that anymore. Those programs are gone. They've been amalgamated with something else. And we hear about recruiting, but as these programs decline, and they have been declining for the last 40 years, and we could go into the philosophy of that, active recruiting of students into programs that university administrators and industry no longer directly financially support makes no sense. If they're disappearing, you can bring all the students you want. I'm 65. The average age of faculty engaged in activities well over 50 years old. We're scarcer than hen's teeth. And a thing called an H index, which the science field loves, now is more important for hiring, tenure, and promotion of faculty and real-world practical engineering knowledge that can be passed on to students. I'm a rarity. I'm a full tenured professor, and I've actually held a real job. That's what I tell people, it's kind of a joke. And the Bureau of Mines, we lost them in 1995. So there's no single agency that represents a relatively large GDP sector of the US. Our mining industry in the US, GDP is larger than that of Canada or Australia, and yet it's buried within everything else. The majority of Western world mineral research is done by the metallurgical service sector, right? They want to get a leg up with their clients. Corporate research and development, mineral processing, extractive metallurgy barely exists, if at all. It used to. And over 1/2 or more, probably more, of experienced mineral and metallurgical engineers will retire in less than 10 years. However, the demand for people like me, mineral processing is exponentially growing as we move to a mineral and metals-based energy economy. Talk to any recruiters or any of our students. We have one young lady who's in my classes. She just started fall semester. She has 2 job offers already, and it's growing. Can't find them. So what are we going to do? Well, I hear, well, we'll hire from other disciplines. Great. As an analogy, if you need a plumber right now, would you hire an electrician? Who's going to be around? Who's going to have time available to retrain them on the job when you have minimal personnel and immediate and growing needs? Who's going to do that? And conversely, I am a visiting professor at Central South University in Changsha, China. So what's happening over there? Well, at Central South University, which I was there in 2019 before the pandemic hit, it is the largest of 38 separate mineral processing schools. We have 0 mineral processing schools in North America. It has 1,000 mineral processing undergraduates and 500 graduate students. Extractive metallurgy is separate and housed in 38 other schools around the country. We have 0, okay? 38 to 0, 38 to 0, okay? You getting the picture? So things like rare earths and cobalt are not rare at all. We have the world's best deposit in the United States. Currently, the concentrates are mined and shipped to China because they have the skills in extractive metallurgy. Cobalt is not rare. We have some deposits in the United States. We produce a little bit of cobalt with some of the concentrates from the Eagle mine. It leaves the country. We have an abundance of minerals and metals. There's no reason to stockpile them. There's even somewhat less reason to explore for them. Getting a permit for a mine is one thing. Finding the experienced people to execute and create a fungible product is the difficulty. So in the United States, mineral processing, extractive metallurgy skills, oops, I'm sorry, I spelled that wrong, are very rare and becoming increasingly rare. Conversely, the Chinese now control what the US had created in rare earths and cobalt and any number of things. We talk about a battery, electric vehicles. We don't make graphite. Right now, we don't make any lithium. We don't make any manganese. We don't make any nickel. We don't make any cobalt in this country. I don't know how that's going to work. It's magic to me. So the world's growing population, as we say over and over, needs a vast amount of future skilled mineral metallurgical engineering professionals. Who's going to be doing innovative research in 20 years? Who's going to fill the gap? Who's going to do the training? And of course, unfortunately for us, the ore bodies that we used to exploit are more complex, they're lower grade, and oftentimes they're in remote or not favorable locations. So who's going to create these new industries like Kroll did? Well, right now, it's happening in China. It's amazing. And who will create an enduring endowed education and research legacy as Kroll did? I don't know. If nobody invests in it, it won't be there. You can recruit all you want. There's no place to go. So here's a picture, and I'll leave you with a comment. These are some of our graduate students and Kroll's thoughts. I'm happy that the gracious fate has allowed me to carry us for a while, the flag of rare metals research, around which many young people have now gathered to carry on where I've left off. So he drove a stake in the ground and made a commitment, and it's still going, and we need other people to do that. So I will leave you with thoughts of Winston Churchill. Success is going from failure to failure without a loss of enthusiasm. And I'm enthusiastic about what I do. My family has been in the mining business since 1810, and my son is in it. So we still keep on going despite everything, right? So anyway, I hope the recording turned out good, and I'm glad for your attendance. It's a privilege and a pleasure to present this. Thank you very much.